We are now recording. Okay, with what we're doing today, we're going to start off with part of element E4, which is investigating incidents, or if you like, accident investigation. Okay, so the learning scope of this particular element says explain why and how incidents should be investigated, recorded and reported. So when we talk about incidents, when we talk about accidents, some various definitions exist. It's all part of this reactive monitoring, looking back at what's happened and making sure we investigate it and then put something in place to learn from it to prevent it happening again. So when we talk about accidents and incidents, we talk about unexpected events, things that are unplanned. And as a result of those events, we tend to say an accident is where someone's been hurt, there's been an injury. An incident or near miss is where an event has occurred, but on this occasion no one got hurt. And another type of incident where there may be damage to equipment or to property of some sort. So obviously from a health and safety point of view, our main thing is about people. So we're looking at accidents and incidents or injuries and near misses. A lot of research has been done over the years showing the ratios, if you like. Now, this is one from the HSC, from the Health and Safety Executive, done some years ago, which showed for every one major injury, there was 11 minor injuries, and then 441 near misses. There's been other research of a similar nature, which said for every one major injury, it was 10 minor injuries and 600 near misses. But at the end of the day, there's a ratio, there's a triangle, if you like, or a pyramid. You know, and at the bottom group there, the near misses, there's always many more near misses than there are like injuries, which I suppose is a good thing. But what it is, those near misses, on this particular chart in front of you, it's 441 opportunities to prevent things occurring in the future and therefore prevent injuries, because today's near miss could be tomorrow's fatality. And another way of showing that, the iceberg comes in quite a few things. Above the surface of the water, if you like, above the surface there, you've got the accidents. But as with an iceberg, it's below the surface, but you get the bulk, that you get the main part. And so those incidents that are experienced, you know, like we can learn from them. If they said you get the bulk, you get all the incidents. So those incidents, so we can learn from those to prevent people getting hurt in the future. Now, some of you may have seen this before, the domino theory. And what it is, the 4 dominoes. The first one says lack of control. That's management issues. You know, the lack of good management. It's a knock-on effect. This could lead to unsafe actions, which can lead to unsafe conditions, and then result in loss, some sort of loss, whether it's injury or damage, what have you. So we've got the 4 dominoes. So the failure of any of the dominoes to the left of loss can result in loss. And then you can say that knock-on effect, like dominoes going over. So there's 4 parts to this. So we're going to have an exercise on this, because we can use this when we look at accident investigation. We look at, well, what were the lack of controls? What were the management failures? What were the unsafe actions that led to the event, or what were the unsafe conditions in the workplace? So that's why we use the dominoes. They're good to be used in accident investigation. So what I've put in front of you on the screen there, we have a scenario, and it says identify the possible causes. So I'll go through it. It says a bakery, and this is a real case as well, this actually happened. A bakery was prosecuted due to the death of 2 employees. The resulting fine and costs totaled over £628,000. 2 engineers had entered a 75-foot long bread oven through a gap on the moving conveyor belt in order to locate and reinstall one of the bread racks which had fallen off. The men realised it was too hot. They tried to turn back. There was no reverse switch. The oven, which operates at 260 degrees Celsius, should have been shut down for 12 hours before entering. Instead, they entered after only 2 hours. The victims were inside the oven for a total of 17 minutes. This is a horrendous case. Now, I'm going to do an exercise with you, but I'm going to show you a film that the HSE made of the accident investigation. So I think what we do, I'm going to put you into groups, and what I want you to do is, on that scenario, consider the lack of controls, the management failures, possible unsafe actions, and unsafe conditions. And the loss is actually more than just those two guys dying. You got there?
No, there's no safety procedure, or they didn't follow it.
Yeah, absolutely. John, any other management issues?
I think we had a couple of other things about whether the machine had been changed so that, if it had guards and physical barriers in place, if they had been removed, then this is maybe the reason why they were able to access the oven the way they did.
As it happens, the way they access the way they access the oven was through the slots where you normally put the dough for the bread. So it wasn't even an official entry point. It was just where the bread goes in, where the dough goes in to be made into bread. So it's quite horrendous. Okay, so let's have some unsafe actions then. Let's go back to Andy. We'll give you a couple of unsafe actions.
Well, they went through a gap that they shouldn't have done.
Yes, entered through the gap.
They went in before the 12 hours.
Yeah. So they'd only been shut down for 2 hours. I will just say, obviously, I said to you, don't get all the information on this. They put 2 big industrial-sized fans at the front of the oven. Put those on for 2 hours, expecting that to cool the oven down enough, and obviously it didn't. But, so that's great. John, got any other unsafe actions?
Well, maybe the fact that they didn't know what the procedure was, but followed it anyway. Went on and did the job. Yeah.
I mean, we can look at this and think there probably wasn't a procedure. I'll give you a little tip here. The company actually got a quote from the oven manufacturer to do the job professionally. And I think the quote came out about £2,500. They said, "Oh, that's okay, we'll do it ourselves." But the result was absolutely horrendous, but yeah. So they weren't trained to do that particular job, certainly. Anything else?
Oh, we got the pressure. Maybe they didn't want to have the oven down for so long, so they're pressured for going in. Yeah, and the pressure thing could be from management. Obviously, we don't want to lose trade because that oven was their main piece of kit. Right? That's their main thing, baking bread. And so so you got the pressure side of it, which could be management pressure, and actually, there's also peer pressure from within the employees on site, because it was FA Cup final day. So they wanted to get out to watch the football. Now, had they gone out and watched the football and come back, the oven probably would have been cool enough for them to enter. But yeah, so peer pressure, certainly, and that could be management and from within the employees as well. Okay. Anything else, John or Andy? They had no alarm or temperature gauge that they could easily see before entering.
There's a frightening point there. You're right. There were temperature gauges, and one of the actions was nobody checked. Nobody checked. There was 3 temperature gauges, and nobody checked. Unbelievable. Unsafe actions entering through the gap, as you say. The fact there was don't want to check the temperature gauge. It was a very sad, very, very sad case. I suppose, entering through the gap, we said riding on a moving conveyor. It's not really what conveyors are designed for, but I think they couldn't see another way of doing it. So riding on the conveyor could be another unsafe action there. Like you say, not waiting for the 12 hours. Okay, I mean, unsafe conditions. How about unsafe conditions? John?
It was just the temperature.
yeah, absolutely. The heat. Oops, excuse me a moment. Yeah, the heat. It's 260 degrees, okay, it wasn't that hot when they went in, but it was still 100 degrees Celsius, you know, and that's way too hot for anybody to go into. Okay. Conditions-wise, anything else?
The length of time there was in there?
Yeah, they didn't have a choice in that. It was the time it took the conveyor to get from one end to the other. So, yeah, so obviously the length of time comes into this. I think as a condition, you might have heard about the fact that no reverse switch. There was no way of, you know, they may have stood a chance had they gotten back to the beginning, but because it couldn't reverse the conveyor. Okay, so unsafe actions, you know, unsafe conditions, and that's what we do, accident investigation. What I'm going to do now, thank you very much, gentlemen, thanks for being the spokespersons. What I'm going to do now is go on to the film one. It's only about 5 or 6 minutes or so. This event happened in 1998. So take that into account in a £628,000 fine. 1998 it happened. So the HSE knew what a terrible case this was, so they made a film of the investigation.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
There are 27 million people with jobs in Britain, and they're protected by a whole mountain of health and safety legislation. This is the story of David Mays, who died at work because even the most basic safety rules were broken.
It's something that should never have been allowed to have happened. If them men had have accepted their responsibility, who was in charge, they could have seen how dangerous it was.
David's job was general maintenance man at this bakery in Leicester, owned by Harvest Time Limited and Fresher Bakeries, producing bread for major supermarkets.
They were looking for temporary workers at a bakery, so he went, he got a job, and he enjoyed it. He told his dad that he thoroughly enjoyed working at a bakery.
In May 1998, there was a problem with this vast 75-foot-long bread oven. Somewhere inside, a grid had fallen off. The company was worried it might get caught up in the machinery and damage the oven. They considered getting a specialist in to dismantle the oven, but in the end, decided to do the job themselves.
They asked David if they'd accompany the engineer, because David was an outdoor man and he'd done potholing. Consequently, he wasn't claustrophobic. So you can see why he was asked if he'd go in.
The oven had been baking bread all night, so it had to be switched off and then cooled down.
The oven wasn't turned off till 9, and my lad went in at 11, just after 11. A couple of hours, 2.5 hours at the most cooling down. It wasn't nowhere near sufficient. It should have been closed down for getting on for 10, 12 hours.
Instead of waiting for the oven to cool down properly, large fans were set up to blast cold air through it.
My lad trusted the engineer and he trusted the chief engineer.
Yes.
They told him to go in the oven and he went in. And
David, along with the maintenance engineer Ian Erickson, crawled into the oven carrying walkie-talkies. They never got out alive.
The Health and Safety Executive was notified that there had been a double fatality at Fresher Bakeries in Leicester on Saturday the 16th of May 1998. I've investigated many fatal accidents in my time, but I have never investigated an accident quite as horrific and tragic as this one.
they were trying to raise him on the walkie-talkies, and then Ericsson came onto the phone, get us out. And that was the last they heard of him. Everything went dead.
There were 3 temperature dials along the side of the ovens to which anybody could look, and indeed, had they looked, they would have realised that the temperatures within the oven was over 100 degrees centigrade. Water boils at 100 degrees centigrade.
There was going into this bottom chamber, and there was going to ride the conveyor along. Absolutely horrific.
They had to keep moving with the moving conveyor, and it only moved in one direction. There was no way out.
had to carry on right through the oven until they got to the other end. Of course, by then, I mean, they were completely burnt to death.
And at the other end, the clearance was only 8 inches. The men would never have got through such a narrow gap.
I think there were frantic attempts made by a lot of people on the shop floor to try and crowbar the plate at the exit end to try and free Ian Eriksson. And then I think there were further attempts made to remove some of the side panels to try and locate David May's body.
But I'd just like to get somebody somewhere be held really responsible for this. And I mean responsible, not just money. David, as a son, he was a good son. He was a good son. If his father or I needed anything, he was there. He used to come, take his dad out for a pint, that sort of thing.
He always used to come up and say, "Come on, Pop, we're going for a pint."
Yeah.
I miss that. I miss it.
Yeah.
David's parents were determined to attend the trial, no matter how painful it would be to hear the evidence.
It feels if we owe it to David. I don't want to miss anything that I think that will let them get off.
So, 3 years after David died, the case came to court. In June 2001, the cause of the accident was finally established.
It is quite often very difficult to actually prove a link of evidence between directors and senior managers within companies to the accident or event. However, in this case, there was such negligence that the Health and Safety Executive decided that there should be charges laid against them because this accident was totally preventable.
Harvest Time Limited and Fresher Bakeries were fined £600,000, and Managing Director John Bridson was fined £20,000. Production Director Brian Jones and Chief Engineer Dennis Masters were fined a total of £3,000. Since the accident, the bakeries installed new safety equipment and overhauled their safety training. The defendants apologised to the families in court.
It took the bakery 3 years to publicly apologise, and I said after 3 years it sounded a bit
Hollow.
But it's over now.
It's over.
That's it, we can put him to rest.
Isn't that sad? The run of events where the lack of safe systems, the lack of permits to work, resulting in the 2 lives lost. There's other costs involved as well, like the other losses, if you like. Can anyone give you another loss as a result? Because we say about lack of control, unsafe actions, unsafe conditions, and then the loss. What other losses besides the 2 lives? What other effects did this case have?
Reputational loss for the business.
Yeah, reputational loss, and that's reputation from clients, among the staff, among local population. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, anybody else?
It's the loss of the time it was all shut down to do the HSE investigation. The loss of business must have been huge.
Huge loss of business, and in fact, in the film there, it said at the end it's quite annoying. Really, they revamped their safety systems and training and what have you. I should have done all that in the first place. But actually, after all of this, after the film was made, the company did actually go out of business.
The emotional cost is obviously going to be high as well, isn't it?
Yes, the emotional cost. The people who witnessed it, that's something they will never forget. So you have got that part of it. So the part of that, the emotional cost as well, the morale of the staff. Morale in the place would have hit rock bottom, I suspect, at that time. And so it's not just about, you've got the cost of the 2 guys and all their family, friends, colleagues, the loss of 2 people. And the fact that you've got the witnesses who would have, heard all that happened, would have been there at the time. As you say, the legal costs, we got the fines involved, company reputation, staff morale. So the cost, when we look at the cost of accidents, it's not just about the finance part of it, it's all those other costs on top of it as well. Why report accidents? Now on the screen it says it's a legal requirement. There are two main bits of law in place here. We've got the Social Security Claims and Payments 1979. This is the one that says maintain an accident book. Now I've grabbed an old accident book here, BI 510 it is now. This is our accident book. Obviously it's empty. We don't have accidents, of course. Actually, it's not. That's just a spare copy, to be honest. I think we had a cut finger on broken glass some years ago from one of my employees. That's about the only thing we've ever recorded, I think. So we've got the accident book. Now, we don't actually have to use that book as long as we're keeping all the relevant information when accidents occur. So that's one part of it. And then RIDDOR. We're coming on to RIDDOR. Someone tell me what RIDDOR stands for?
Reporting of injuries, diseases and dangerous occurrences.
It is. And what's the final R?
Regulations.
Regulations. A lot of people forget the final R. Yeah, the reporting of injuries, diseases and dangerous occurrences of regulations. Okay, so we've got other reasons to report. Well, for a start, if we know things are going wrong in the workplace, then we can do something about it to prevent things going wrong in the future. So it's helping to prevent a recurrence of the incident, trying to make the workplace safer, to look after our staff, to show concern for our staff. So hopefully that can help improve morale. So there's not more than two reasons to report. There's the legal side of it, but there's the other issues as well. So if accident investigation, I'm just going through various stages here. Say why investigate accidents? There's some reasons. In fact, if we investigate and we see there's problems, then that helps us to decide on control measures or remedial action to prevent things happening again. Okay, so I've got a question for you now. It's only a short question. It says, what documents may need to be checked during the investigation process, giving reasons why each would need to be considered? So I'm going to put you back into groups.
So I was on mute. No, nothing else on me.
Okay, that's fine. It's a very wide-ranging question because it doesn't say what sort of accident there's been. It just says the investigation process. So possibly, if it involved a forklift truck or mechanical handling device, there would need to be a certificate of thorough examination. That's under a set of regulations called LOLA, or lifting operations, lifting equipment regulations. So had the equipment, had the appropriate inspection, or if it was failure of local exhaust ventilation used to extract dusts and fumes, again, that would have to have a specialist thorough examination. So there's records we can look at. You mentioned policy, you mentioned training records, certainly. We could look at induction records, you might look at not just previous accident reports, but previous incident reports, or even staff complaints, or complaints from safety representatives, for instance. Okay, so yes, there's quite a wide range of documentation can be checked during the investigation, and it all comes down to, well, what was the event? That would give us an idea of what sort of documentation might have been in place. Okay, it's just a few things on the chart there. You will be getting these slides, so I'll try and write those down. It's just a very wide range. Okay. Right, so initial actions after a serious accident. It's a bit like in a first aid case. First thing you do is don't put yourself in danger. You make sure the area is safe to enter. But of course, we have the first aid procedures, which could be in-house first aid, or we need to get the emergency services in, either way. So we've got to look after the victim, look after the people who've been hurt. We want to secure the area because we don't want anything moved or tampered with. We want to, for the investigation purpose, we want to make sure nothing's touched, so then we can see, try and work out exactly what happened. But it may be power sources, it may be equipment, things need turning off and isolating, so they can't be switched back on again. So removing the power source. It may not just be producing power, it could be liquids running through pipe work. There's been an accident involving pipe work. So it's trying to isolate as much as possible. Now, reporting wise, obviously, internally, various people are going to want to know about an accident, you know, from management, safety people, etc. And then externally, of course, back to RIDOR, which I know we will be doing in a while, the actual what RIDOR is all about. But yeah, certain things we have to report under reporting of injuries, diseases and dangerous occurrences regulations. And also, there's the human cost here, so informing the next of kin. Now, it depends on the level of accident, obviously, what the injuries were. You know, someone's been taken to hospital, for instance. You know, the family need to know what's going on. So it's letting the next of kin know what's happened. As I said again, we said about reporting, well, internally, so like communications, you know, senior management, and especially staff safety reps as well. And when I say safety reps here, that could be, you know, safety reps under the safety committee regulations, or your representatives of employees' safety. For the purpose of this, we call everybody safety reps, for the staff reps, in other words. And then there's the investigation team. Now, the health and safety executive have a document on a guidance, if you like, on accident investigation. It's been around for many, many years. Part of within this guide, it says about the level of investigation. Now, obviously, if we've got something that's quite minor, we still want to know about it because it may be minor today, but it could be a fatality tomorrow. So we still need to, you know, those incidents or small level, if you like, low level injuries. So from the point of view of the level of investigation, we have to weigh up, well, how likely is it to reoccur? How likely is the event to reoccur? And then what sort of like severity of injury? Now, in this event, they usually look at the worst consequence. You know, like in general risk assessment, we spoke about, we look at the most likely consequence of something going wrong. When we look at accident investigation, we're looking at when something's occurred, we're thinking, well, if that occurs again, that could lead to someone dying. So, you know, so we have a level, if you like, of investigation depending on the likelihood of recurrence and the worst consequence of what might happen. And so if we've got a minimal level investigation, you know, it says the relevant supervisor look into circumstances of the event and try to learn any lessons which will prevent future occurrences. And that's at one end of the scale. Then we go up to the sort of like the high level investigation, and the high level we're talking involve a team-based investigation involving supervisors, line managers, health and safety advisors, employee representatives. It says it will be carried out under the supervision of senior management or directors, and we'll look for the immediate underlying and root causes. The underlying causes are those which lead to the unsafe actions and unsafe conditions. So the agency give a guide as to the level of investigation. So you won't always have a team, you know, like sometimes it can say just be a local supervisor. As long as there's some sort of training, you know, you can do in-house courses, some sort of training as to what sort of things to look for. And that is the guidance, the 245. So it's health and safety guidance note number 245 from the health and safety investigator, HSG 245, health and safety guidance note 245 from the health and safety executive. Okay, and it just gives a step-by-step guide to go through. Obviously, I've got to show you this properly on the screen, but I don't even know if you can see it. I've got this book in front of me. It's quite comprehensive. So it's about 80 pages. It's been around a long time. It's a step-by-step guide through accident investigation. It's actually a very good book. And of course, Nebosh do have their own accident investigation course nowadays, just a one-day course. Okay. So accident investigation, it's a lot about gathering information. Who is involved, what happened, when did it happen, where did it happen, who witnessed it? Yeah, so it's information, a lot of it's information gathering. And from that, you know, like from that sort of like it's then sort of analysing that information and working out the immediate causes, the root causes, you know, as a management phase, if you like. And then, of course, the underlying causes, those that lead to the unsafe actions and the unsafe conditions. So it's quite a causal tree, I call it. You can build up quite a picture of all the things that helped lead to that event, that accident. And so having analysed the information, then it's what can we do about it? And so the control measures, recommendations, some long term, it might be short term actions we can take immediately to prevent things happening. Same as damaged equipment, or immediately we can take it out of the workplace, get rid of it. So long term, we might think about long term planning for new equipment, for new systems, new training, etc. And then of course you've got to weigh all this up, and you have to look at what are our options, what can we do now, what we need to plan for the future. Because you look at the trends and the costs of these accidents, and the costs of the control measures, you can't always do everything at once. So we have to weigh that up and sort of the most important things first, a bit like risk assessment, the highest risk things we sort out first, work our way down. And trends, accident trends, it's about looking at previous accident records. Yeah, we might find actually we've had a similar accident happening several times a year for the last 5 years. That rather tells you something is wrong. Something else needs to be done to put into place to prevent it from happening again. And with our recommendations, with our control measures, you might remember SMART. Can anybody tell me what SMART stood for or stands for?
Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound, depending on the definition.
Yeah, well done, well done. It is. There are several versions of SMART, but yes. So specific. So when we say about take action and put control measures in place, say specifically what this is going to be, what this measure is going to be. Measurable. Something we've put a target in place. We're going to prevent these accidents or reduce accidents by such a percent. So the measurable, we know what's happened now, and we can check in the future to see have we managed to reduce. Achievable. There are other versions, but achievable, and realistic. Two things that to me are quite similar, but achievable, something that can actually be done. Something is realistic. It can happen. I mean, the time bound, as you say, put a time limit. So any recommendation we put in place, we say we should be done within a month, 2 months, 3 months, or it could be done immediately. There's various timescales we can use depending on what the issue is. And so the accident investigation process, we're gathering information, we're analysing that information, we're putting some control measures in place to prevent a recurrence, and then taking those actions, checking that the measurements, the things we put in place, checking that they've been put in place, and they're working. And the big one there also is letting people know, communication, telling people this is what happened, this is what we're doing about it to stop it from happening again. And so communicating, getting back to people in the workplace is very important. And just a little flow chart thing here. It just shows the measures can be taken. So it starts at the top left and works its way down and back up and then down again. So take control of the scene. Keep other people away. Check, obviously, for the first aid part of it, the casualty side of it, check will be treated. Isolations, about the area and the equipment. Record, the what, the whys, the whens, like what happened, when and how. Who was involved? That's from the point of view of victims and witnesses. So we take witness statements. And that can be an issue. If we don't get the witness statements soon enough, you might have 5 witnesses, and it may be so we're going to come out 5 different versions of what they saw. Because you don't expect to see an accident. So something happens in front of you. It takes the brain a few seconds to register what just happened. So you may get conflicting witness statements. We try and get those statements pretty quick. And then obviously details of injury we have to record. And then we're establishing the causes, the root causes, immediate causes, and things that lead to the immediate, like the underlying, the unsafe actions, conditions. Record all this, put something in place to stop it happening again, or remedial action, and then communicate to people. So it's a nice little flow chart to show what to do in the event of accidents.